Welcome everybody to the Everton Byline. This is episode 70. Can you believe it? Cheers to everybody who continues to listen and support us. Thanks to everybody who came up to me before, during, well, it wasn't in the ground long, but during and after the game against Newcastle on Saturday.
Did you leave?
Do you know what? Well, this is Paddy Boylan, the show regular listeners will know. He is from The Athletic. But I was ready to go at half time, to be honest, Paddy, but our good friends, Mark Mosey, Chris Davis, and Nick Preble convinced me to stay a bit longer. But it's been a while since we did like a full exit plan. So it was like, if they score again first, we're going. If Everton don't score before 70, we're going. And they were the parameters that were set out at that point. Which was quite good on our part, to be fair. Quite like that.
I wish I could have done the same.
At least it was an easy job. That's the journalist's dream. I mean, maybe Rob Everton were 4-0 obviously, but was it 4-0 on 55? Was it 60? You got half an hour to write your copy before the game finishes.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, I'll take myself out of this because my role's slightly different to most match-going journalists. I'm not having to write for full time immediately on the whistle. So that's one big difference. The other is that obviously reporting on Everton and growing up, having followed the club, I want Everton to do well. But for most journalists at that point, as soon as it goes kind of 3-0, you're already crafting a match piece that's based on Newcastle winning by a large margin, you'd argue, against Everton away from home and ending that duck, breaking that duck this season in the Premier League for them away from St James's. Mine's a little bit different, as I say, but what it did give me a chance to do, because I had absolutely zero inclination that Everton were likely to get back into the match. It gave me a chance to think about what I wanted to write and how it would be framed and so on and so forth. So it was easier from that perspective. Not a great one to write or commentate on, but just a reminder of how quickly things can change in football.
Massively so.
When did we record? So we recorded on Tuesday after the Old Trafford win. That goes out obviously later on Tuesday. Some people listen to it on Wednesday. The change in mood, the change in tone 5 days on. So dramatic, so stark, and obviously not in a good way, unfortunately. So, not quite as cheery a podcast as the last one.
No, we'll get onto that. Because I was so flat off the Saturday. I'm sure people listening to the post-match podcast we do will probably be saying, "Grow up, Matt," and all that. But we'll get onto all that. Just a reminder before we start, we are sponsored by the brilliant Bridewell pub in town. A lot of people, again, on Saturday talking about, in the Denby afterwards, talking about how they've been to the Bridewell before the game. We will definitely be going in personally on that 20th against Arsenal. There is a lot of daytime to film before that match kicks off at 8 o'clock. So, plenty of opportunities coming up over the next few weeks to get down there if you're not already. Probably your favourite time of year to go out having a pint in Liverpool. I don't know about you, Paddy, around Christmas time. It feels like everyone's very friendly, lights are up, cosy. Do get down there if you've not been already. Maybe you're a regular in there. I might see you down there over the Christmas period. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can't hit like, can't hit subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll get notified when any of our podcasts go up.
Leave a rating.
What was that? Leave a rating. Leave a rating on.
Somebody
did that. Did someone do it?
Yeah.
I missed that. I missed that one. Leave a rating or a comment. The more traditional method of commenting on YouTube videos. If you subscribe, you get notified whenever a video goes up. Be it Blue Mondays, the Reaction Weekly, Mailbag, or anything else. And if you listen to us on iTunes or on Spotify, you can leave us a rating there, and you can leave a comment as well on Spotify too, which more and more people are doing. So cheers to those of you who are getting involved and interacting with the show. And if you want to email us any longer form stuff, which people continue to do as well, it's evertonbyline@gmail.com. Paddy, let's talk about Saturday. I'm still really flat. And I sort of put on Twitter and I said this in the instant reaction pod, but I'm so annoyed at myself for we're getting carried away after Man United, and like I met me dad in town before the game, and like we had a couple of hours like drinking, like some of our family were around there, and I met my mates, and like we so it was such a great time. And me and my dad started talking about the game, and he was like, "I've got a bad feeling about this one today. I've got a bad feeling about it." I was like, "Don't be so negative." I was like, "We've just done a great performance on Monday. You know, we've got 7 points from our last 9." I was like, "Just need to be more positive about these sorts of things." And I should have deferred to his much more extensive Everton knowledge compared to mine, because he was spot on. And
Yeah.
like, it's one of those, isn't it? Like when you get a result like Man United, and you get a bit carried away and a bit confident about the team, to follow it up with something like that. And I think like the first minute in particular, and I described it on the Instant Reaction podcast as the worst minutes of football in Everton's history. I don't think it's far off. I don't think for Everton to kick off, concede a chance, and then be 1-0 down from a corner, which in itself took 10, 15 seconds to take. All aside, that first minute is spectacularly bad. But I mean, how did you feel about it? I mean, after that first minute was the die cast effectively, because it always felt like after that, given the effort they put in on Monday, and given the quality that Newcastle have got and the way they want to play on the counter attack and in transition, that minute it always felt like it was going to be really hard to recover from.
Yeah, so a little bit like Colin Jones, I was quite pessimistic going into this one from an Everton perspective. I think part of that is the sort of Evertonian fatalism that is something nice has just happened, so something bad has to follow it to puncture the optimism like a lead balloon. But I also, my concern was the extent to which Monday's performance would have taken something out of those players, coupled with the fact that actually there wasn't much wiggle room squad-wise, there wasn't much room for manoeuvre. And obviously Newcastle also played in midweek, but they didn't play with, as far as I'm aware, they didn't play with 10 men for 80, 90 minutes. And they also, I believe, made 6 changes for the Everton game. So this is a much deeper squad that's had a lot more money spent on it. That's able to roll the dice and get results as a result. That's not to excuse what Everton did. I don't think it's good enough from anybody really associated with Everton on Saturday. I struggle to list a positive performance beyond Keane and Dewsbury Hall. And I don't think tactically it was managed in the right way anyway. The goal inside the first minute, I think, or the minute itself, I think actually shines a real kind of firm spotlight on all of Everton's problems in the game. So they get dominated from the corner. Very similar goal for me to the one Van de Ven scored. The second goal, I think it was, that Van de Ven scored in the Spurs defeat, where effectively it's that space between Tarkowski and Keane and in front of Pickford. And nobody really within that zone is taking enough responsibility, and Everton get dominated. We saw that a few times in the game. Newcastle obviously huge. Moyes said afterwards that probably with Arsenal, they are the most physically dominant side in the league. It wasn't so often, of course, that Everton were doing this to other sides, but I think we've spoken previously on this podcast, and particularly after Tottenham, that there's kind of a sense that Everton are going the other way to the rest of the Premier League. They're getting a kind of a bit smaller, a bit slower, a bit more technical at a time when everything's speeding up, when it's all about physicality and long throws. And I think we saw some of that again on Saturday. The other thing, though, I think we need to point out was actually the concession of the corner and the tactical issue there in that kind of space between midfield and defence. I'm not saying Idrissa Gueye being there would have stopped this, but I think it was it Tarkowski or Keane that gets rolled far too easily by Baltamada in midfield, and then Mikolenko's outpaced the high line, sees him get outpaced by a much quicker, admittedly, Anthony Elanga. I don't think Everton ever solved that tactical conundrum. That was the warning sign. But Newcastle tend to play with 3 in there, really. It's Joe Linton as a third midfielder. The other 2 are very, very good in Tonali and Bruno. And you've got the Everton 2 kind of going man-to-man, but with Joe Linton or even Voltemada as the third or fourth men, the spare men. There were times when Everton pushed up, as we saw in that clip, and got punished in behind by the pace of Elanga and Barnes. And there were also times when Everton stepped back and conceded goals because of how far back they were. I mean, I'm thinking Jordan Pickford makes a real error for Lewis Miley's goal, Newcastle's second of the game. But actually, again, James Tarkowski is right in front of him and just doesn't need to be there. And that reduces Pickford's visibility. It reduces his reaction time. This, to me, was a game in which Newcastle were better in basically every element of play. Yes, as Moyes said, they were more physical. But on top of that, they had the extra speed and the extra technique as well. So it was about as comprehensive. Whereas I came away from the Tottenham game thinking, that just shows how mad football can be and how random it can be at times, because this was not a 3-0 game. I think this Newcastle one was a bit more comprehensive, and Everton had spells. I think the spell between 1-0 and 2-0, you could say Everton are the better team in the game and pushing forwards. But losing the first goal meant that Newcastle were almost able to play the perfect away game, the one that suited them, where they could sit deep, absorb pressure, and then hit on the counter-attack. So really, really disappointing day all round. And while the 1-0 win at Manchester United didn't mean that everything was okay and everything was right with the world, here, arguably, I'd say that a 4-1 defeat to Newcastle in isolation doesn't necessarily have to mean that this team is dreadful and going to get relegated. The reality is, as we've said a number of times on this show, there'll be ups and downs and bumps in the road. What we've seen with Everton is it can happen in the space of 6 days. And I'm not going to make a prediction about Bournemouth on Tuesday night because I hate going to that place.
Yeah. Like, I think the reason why that first minute, like obviously conceding a goal in the first minute is never good. But I think the reason why it's so bad in this instance is that I think there are so many little things that happen in that minute that just leave everyone kind of on edge for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like the first bit where Voltemada goes into midfield and picks up that space. Once he's done that turn, for the rest of the game, then it's like who goes in there now because it's not working. Exactly. So Keane doesn't know whether to go. Irabuna doesn't know where to drop back. Darnold doesn't know where to pick him up. Tarkowski doesn't know where to stand off. And all of a sudden, you've got 4 lads in that area of the pitch who are kind of like, oh, God, I really wish Idrissa was here. So you've got that. Then you've got the searing pace of Elanga on the counter-attack. And like, listen, he walked past Mikalenko, didn't he?
Yeah.
So then if you're trying to play a high line and you've been burned like that in the first minute of the game, all of a sudden, if that's the plan, and the plan shouldn't really change after 52 seconds of the game, then all of a sudden, Mikalenko and that rest of that back 4 are thinking, I'm not sure about this. We've been done already, and you're worried immediately about that ball that goes in behind. And then the other thing is the set piece, isn't it? Like the set piece coming in, them scoring from that. Like, and again, like even during that spell where we had a lot of possession of the ball, like I don't know about you, but I was sort of sat there thinking, there's a counter-attack coming here, or there's a set piece coming again here. And we're going to be nervous and we're not going to be able to get back and we're going to be on edge. And I think just the way in which they sort of got in our heads with those sort of free moments, the Voltemada drop into midfield, the counter-attack with pace and the set piece, it just laid the groundwork for Everton to just be a bit panicky about everything in those parts of the game where ultimately Newcastle were able to exploit because they scored that opening goal. I mean, probably the best example is the third one, isn't it? Like just before half time, where everybody, Paddy looking up in the air, then trying to stretch his memory back to which goal that was. It was a bit of a blur at times, but like you think about that goal, and Irabuna is so indecisive, isn't he? And just gets completely lost under the ball. Mikalenko is not in the right place. Keane's nowhere near it. Like that, the way in which Everton defend that goal, even Pickford for that one, the way he sort of rushes out and Baltimore just lifts it over him. There are so many scrambled heads in blue on the football
collective
pitch
head loss
at that point, aren't there?
Yeah, collective head loss. I think Irabuna makes a mistake, and I think he makes 2 pretty big mistakes actually in the context of the game as a whole. I think we saw actually that he's not comparable in quality to Idrissa Gueye. He's probably best as a sort of impact sub, but I don't think we're talking enough about the rest of the defending for that moment. I mean, like when you see Anthony Elanga picking up the ball, Voltemada is basically completely free with nobody anywhere near him. I think Keane's about 15, 20 yards behind. Mikolenko's got no idea where he is. And actually it doesn't require those two, Irabunum and Mikolenko, to go out to deal with Elanga anyway. So that wasn't the only moment where it was like that from an Everton perspective. I mean, some of the stills you could take where you actually pinpoint where Everton's defensive line is are quite remarkable from that match. So there was a whole heap wrong. I also thought that there was probably an indecision at the back that surprised me in moments. I think you see it with Miley's second goal and Irabunum not being able to gather the ball and then them not being able to clear the ball and so on. But there were other moments, one moment at the back post where Jake O'Brien very, very dwells on the ball and very, very nearly lets in, I think it was Harvey Barnes at the back post. It just felt like one of those games where everyone was a little bit on edge, and some of us spoke to Jake O'Brien after the match and did that usual thing where we speak to an Everton player in the mix zone, and he was saying that he felt as though the performance was flat. I think that's a really interesting comment when you unpack that. And obviously he was asked why it was flat. He couldn't really put his finger on it. Is it the fact that they expended so much effort with 10 men against Manchester United and with a small squad just weren't able to go again quite so soon? I mean, if it is that, should these players really not be up for a 5:30 under the lights against Newcastle, an opportunity to get another win on the board? And I think at that point, if Everton had won, they'd have been right up into contention for those European places, as it were. So that kind of begged the question for me. Just like I say, I kind of none of them really came out with any credit, with the exception of Dewsbury Hall, with his admittedly magnificent goal. Really good piece of skill. That just kind of doesn't matter. I think everyone just brushes over that when it was a really, really good goal. That should probably be in Premier League Goal of the Month compilations. My slight concern about this, maybe it's more than a slight concern, is that this was effectively the dress rehearsal for the period without Idrissa Gueye. When you look at the calendar now, and as far as I'm aware, Everton actually haven't been given a date yet when he departs for AFCON. But AFCON starts around the 20-something of December. It doesn't finish until January the 18th. So one of the things I calculated is that if Senegal get through to the final, you're probably missing 6-ish Premier League games just for AFCON if you're Gueye and Ndiaye. And that's before you even take into account that he's got another 2 games coming up for his suspension. Obviously, Everton tried to overturn the ban, but couldn't do so. I believe actually that they thought they had a stronger case when it came to not overturning the ban as such, but reducing it based on precedent, given the amount of contact and whatever else. Obviously, they didn't have that go in their favour as well, and we're still waiting on the written rationale for that as of the time of recording. But I think we all wondered how Everton would cope in this period. And actually, you've not got Merlin Roll. Plan A, which was Irabunum, really did not work well. And maybe that was a Newcastle thing and a tactical thing for that specific game, but you'd be surprised necessarily if Moyes went with the same thing again. There's just not a whole load of other options. And I'd argue there's not much wriggle room now across the whole squad, because you've got Jake O'Brien playing at right back, which means that you've only got 2 fit centre-backs in Keane and Tarkowski. They have to play a certain way, and if you play them in a high line, you see what happens on Saturday. And then in midfield, James Garner has to play in central midfield now, so can't go to right back. Irabunum comes in for Gueye, but Gueye's suspended and then is at AFCON. who do you do? Who do you put in there apart from that? Do you drop Dewsbury Hall back? Do you play Alcaraz? Do you play them, the two of those two, as kind of number 8 with Garner sitting? All of a sudden, it just feels really stretched, and I'm not actually sure whether there's a perfect solution. To be honest, I'm not even. I suppose time will tell, but I'm not even sure there's a passable one right now. Are you?
No, like, and yeah, I don't know what you do with that now, because I sort of wouldn't be surprised if Rabunum still started against Bournemouth, because, like, you know, if you're going to play him and he's going to be your holding midfielder for the next month or two, which it looks like he's going to be, then you've got to give the lad a bit of time. And, like, listen, he was horrendous on Saturday. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those where I suppose it's who he phrases right. Who does he trust? Who does he least trust more out of Irabunum and Alcaraz? Like, I feel like that's where we're at now. Like, so I don't think he really like properly fancies either of them, does he? But it's going to get to a situation where one of them is ultimately going to have to play. If Roll's off for a while, obviously Gay's going to be out for a while. Apart from maybe that Chelsea away game is the one he might play in, isn't it? I think
that was that. I mean, that was kind of back of a paper kind of maths from me.
Yeah.
I was working out that he technically comes back for that Chelsea game. Comes back from suspension for that Chelsea game, which is December the 13th. Given AFCON starts on the 20-something, you wouldn't have thought he'd be available for the Arsenal game on the 20th, which is a big loss. So it kind of, if anything, it's the Chelsea match. But that's the best case scenario. I think the best case scenario is that he's available for one match here, and then you lose and die as well.
Like, it is, it is a big, and I think Garnett and Irabunum, I think I'm right in saying, are on 4 bookings each, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
They're potentially,
yeah.
Like, imagine they both got booked on Tuesday. Like, what's your midfield for Forest?
Well,
like,
yes,
it's really, really stretched at the moment, and like you said, that there's hardly any wiggle room. Like we're not a million miles off from having to play Dwight McNeil in there again. Like that is a situation I could easily see happening over the next few weeks, just because of how short we are on bodies in there. Like, listen, we had a great laugh on Tuesday, didn't we, about the red card because Everton won, and listen, it was funny, and I think we were right to sort of have a giggle about it, but
yeah.
like, the stark reality of what happens now was there for everyone to see on Saturday, wasn't it? But
yeah.
I think if Irabunum was your plan A and you settled on it, like, I think you've got to give him more than one game. Like,
You've also got to probably give him a little bit more cover in there as well.
Yeah, I think for me, like, the main issues on Saturday with that midfield and the difference in the fullbacks between both sides was just like a proper chasm, wasn't it? And every time I watch Livramento play, it's just one of those where you're just so frustrated that we could have had him all those years ago. And I think Benitez turned his nose up on him because
he did. I mean, that was obviously after. I think I reported that after the Livramento was leaving Chelsea. So in the end, actually, Livramento goes to Southampton and then on to Newcastle from there. They make a big profit on him, Southampton. That deal was there for Everton to do. It wasn't the only deal, of course. That Denzel Dumfries was there, but Livramento was seen as a top young talent, and Everton don't sign him under Benitez, and then bring in Nathan Patterson, basically I think a window or two later. You also had the cruel irony of Voltemada, who had been quite heavily tracked by Everton, and they'd kind of registered interest in him going on to, for my money, what was probably low bar here, but the best centre forward display at Hill Dickinson so far this season in terms of all-round ability. There's not many to choose from there. I mean, I'm thinking to Danny Welbeck missing a penalty, and Barry and Beto, and even Tottenham. Really, they won that game purely based on set pieces.
I can't even remember who played up front for them that day. Was it Colin Mwani?
Well,
yeah, it was. Yeah.
So that tells you everything you need to know about that one. that deal was problematic in certain ways because it did eventually just get too expensive anyway. You look at what Newcastle paid for him, that would not have been within Everton's budget. Ends up being 60-ish million rising. So they would never have got to that point. But he was there earlier in the window. And I think the decision was made that they were going to go in a different direction. And other clubs, kind of big clubs then, I'm not just talking about Newcastle, I'm talking about like Bayern Munich and such, registering interest. I mean, he looked like a quality player. So you've got the irony of those two doing really well. And I think you're right about the fullbacks. I mean, we've banging on about this all season now, kind of how the fullbacks really still to Everton's play. You saw what a difference Livramento and Hall made in getting Newcastle on the front foot, opening up space for their midfielders and forwards. Hall, if I'm not mistaken, sets up Chow. I think it's pronounced Chow for the fourth goal. Livramento has the admittedly wayward shot that comes back to Miley for the second. And they actually outnumbered Everton in midfield at times coming inside. Like the difference between those two, they are kind of, if we're ranking those two in Premier League terms as a duo, they're probably somewhere around Champions League, Europa League in the Premier League table. Oh, where would O'Brien and Mikolenko be? And bear in mind that the context for the game is that Everton are behind for over 90 minutes here when you include additional time. So
I'm not being brutal. Well, it is brutal, but you'd probably say last, wouldn't you? Really? Like,
there's a certain context where having those two probably helps you when you're trying to bed in, or you're facing an aerial onslaught, or you need to do a job on opposition wingers when you are ahead. But as a duo, when Everton are trying to get back into the game, yeah, you're right.
Like I was just so struck by, and you're right. Like they are, I think with them too, Newcastle kind of got their fullback position sorted, haven't they, for the next 5 years, realistically, unless someone comes in and buys one of them. But the flexibility they gave the team was just so different to what we used to see from us. Like there were times where, as you mentioned, Livramento would drop into midfield and he'd invert. There were times where Hall would sort of tuck in and make a back three when they were building up possession. There were times when they both bomb on and like get round the outside of the wingers, and it just kept us completely on guard and unsettled defensively for the entire game. And
it pinned Everton's two most dangerous players back as well, didn't it? It pinned Grealish. Grealish is having to do all the donkey work in his own half, and Dye on the other side. Don't think it's any surprise that certainly Ndai had his weakest game, I would argue, for quite some time, and maybe even Grealish as well. I think sometimes that's the best form of defence. It's to get on the front foot and to pin those exciting wingers back, and Everton just don't have quality comparable with that right now. Certainly not in those full-back positions. I think that's one of the big... There are a number of areas that need improvement in this Everton squad, obviously, but that's one going even back to the summer. I think everybody identified and said, that's residual, that's outstanding, that still needs to happen.
Yeah, it was bad. But good job, Paddy. We've got Bournemouth away and Dyche to come on this week. That's nice. Anyway, let's focus on Bournemouth. Obviously, we'll be playing that game tonight by the time this does eventually go out. And Bournemouth and the preparations for it, because the manager, as ever, has drawn a lot of debate around what he said in the aftermath of Newcastle and at Monday's press conference as well. So following the game against Newcastle, I think a lot of people took issue with the fact that he's talking about how they're better, and if they came and played well, then we were never going to get anywhere near them. Obviously, that's not debating, but sort of talking up their talents and how good they are, and it was kind of one of them. So people are unhappy about that, especially given Newcastle's game in midweek in Marseille and their away record this season, which was obviously pretty poor up until the weekend. And then his press conference on Monday, he was asked a few questions And I think one from Julia Boulder at Merseyside really seemed to irk him, and he snapped back a little bit at Julia. But
what do you think was the one question? Sorry,
what about the sort of mood around the team?
Right. Do you not think it was the question about, because Moyes had said, as you pointed out there, he'd said something about kind of Newcastle.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Being kind of far ahead of Everton, and Everton not being able to compete, and I know that had irked some fans. So perfectly legitimate question for Julia to ask. I'd argue, but I don't think he liked 100%.
That. Yeah.
I don't think he liked that. I mean, I think it's worth remembering. I'm sure this is what you were getting at, Matt, or where we were going with this. I think it is worth remembering that you've got two people in there doing very different jobs.
Yeah.
So Julia's job as a journalist is to ask questions like that, whether people like it or not. It's also Moyes' job to deal with those questions in a way that he thinks benefits Everton Football Club and his players and even him. So these aren't necessarily people with the same aims in those moments. But yeah, I think Julia's right to ask that question. It's a perfectly pertinent question. And I also think it's right to ask why Everton lost 4-1 at home to Newcastle, of course. I don't think the gap is so wide between these teams that's the best Everton could aspire to. Yes, Everton are missing key players. I still think Jarrod Branthwaite's a massive loss in a number of ways. One of them is tactically, as we mentioned earlier. I think he's a potential solution to some of the issues we saw. But Everton took 4 points against Newcastle last season as well. And yes, they've got some very good players. They can beat Everton on their day, of course. But it was not a good result. It was not a good performance. And I think it should prompt a bit of soul searching from everyone. More or less.
Do you think that it feels to me like that line from Moyes is sort of, I think it's probably twofold, really. I think he's maybe trying to protect the players who are a bit tired and a bit done in after that game against Man United on Monday. But I think there's definitely a bit of self-preservation in there as well, isn't there? I think that's something that Moyes is always, maybe not to the extent that Dyche did towards the end that we talked about a lot, where it was just about protecting his own reputation. But Moyes is a very canny operator. He's very experienced. He's been around for a while. So maybe one of those that after a heavy defeat, it's not trying to absolve himself completely of the blame, but it felt like there's a bit of that in there too.
Yeah, and he also won't like losing games of football, whoever they're against, and whatever he says publicly. So that will feed into his reaction to everything, including some of the questions he gets asked. Maybe it's some self-preservation, as you say. Maybe highlighting the gap in expenditure between these two squads, and that's fair. Newcastle are further on in the project. He's right to say that. They've been with the same manager now for a long period of time and being able to build. It's also right to point to the context, which is Newcastle hadn't won I think it was a Premier League game in 8 months. So it's not just this season, but in 8 months since, I think it was about April last year when I looked through. It's not a side that's been playing well away from home. Everton had injuries. Newcastle got some players back, and I think the fullbacks obviously massively helped them there. He's well within his rights, of course, to respond how he wants, and he's also well within his rights to try to protect his players. I think he genuinely does believe as well that this group, which is still an incomplete group, as we all know, in a number of ways, has done well from where it was when he inherited it in January, and he's got a lot of admiration for, even down to say Beto, who's not done it this season. You can see there's a clear affection there for Beto in terms of what he did for him last season. So I think he does feel a bit of a loyalty. And I think if people question his players, then I think he is going to get a little bit more defensive. And I asked on Saturday, I'm sure people have seen the post-match presser now. I asked specifically later on in the presser about the impact of Idrissa Gueye, and he made that answer about Newcastle. As a manager, he's probably less likely to go, well, of course we're going to struggle without Idrissa, and Timo Rabunen wasn't good enough or isn't good enough. He's never going to say that, is he? So I think we need to bear that in mind as well. I think it just shows, doesn't it, like the the mood, the atmosphere has changed a little bit. It doesn't take much for things to flip on their head. And I think I'm consciously aware when I go into some of these guys are all really intense, really driven, often emotional at times after results. And remember with some of the other guys, like Guardiola's always got that thing, and Klopp always had it, where you're thinking at any moment in a press conference the wrong thing is said, and it's going to completely flip. Yeah, they're all a little bit like that.
I think the schedule point doesn't help either. Like, you know, it's not usually most of the season they've had a week, haven't they, to kind of take stock, have a bit of a deep breath. But you know, back in on Monday morning after what he would have been in that stadium late on Saturday night, you've had one full day to kind of recover from it and think about it. Like it might still be a little bit raw, still, mightn't it? And you know, the emotions may not completely come down yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I say this as a journalist who's not expending any physical effort on a Premier League football pitch, but I don't think anybody's particularly keen to travel down to. I certainly am not.
Would they travel down? Sorry, but would Everton travel down straight after that press conference? Do you think, or would they travel down tomorrow?
It depends. It depends. I know normally with Bournemouth, Everton tend to fly.
Okay.
Their airport's close to the ground, so that doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay over. Usually they fly back from the game the night of the game, even after a night game, because I think the players like being at home and everyone feels better there. The option is open to them to fly on Monday and then travel. I don't know specifically in this case. That's available to them, but there's not much you can do in that period as a result, and any kind of the lingering knocks kind of come into this game now as a result. I mean, Moyes did say in his press conference that certain players were carrying injuries, but kind of sort of had to play anyway. I mean, going back to the point we made earlier, Everton can't really afford an injury in, let's say, for argument's sake, central defence. I mean, this is an interesting thought kind of experiment, Matt, but if Michael Keane gets injured, and this is hypothetical, but if he gets injured, how do Everton even make that work? Who comes in for him? Because the logical answer would be, you'd say, Jake O'Brien. It's not going to be Reece Welsh or Eli Campbell, the under-21 regulars who were on the first team bench on Saturday. But you bring Jake O'Brien into the centre, and then there's not really a right back there. Coleman's
Where's Nathan Patterson? By the way,
Patterson is not long back in training.
Right. Okay. So he might not be miles away then.
So he's a while away, and he's also obviously missed a lot of pre-season as well. So that's going to be tough. So I mean, I'm just throwing that out there, like getting injury in central defence. How do you even?
It's got to be O'Brien, hasn't it? And then it'd be Garner to right back, and it would have to be
Irabunam, Alcaraz,
Dewsbury Hall as your midfield three.
Yeah,
I'm telling you now, Paddy, we will see Dwight McNeil in central midfield over this festive period.
Well, I think it's inevitable that we see Dwight McNeil, not necessarily just in attacking midfield, but Ndiaye goes, doesn't he? So he'll be seen as part of the solution on the wings too. But I mean, I think Moyes said when he was asked about how they compensate for the latest in a succession of injuries to Merlin Roll, I think he said in his presser on Friday that McNeil can play in an attacking role if needs be, and Dewsbury Hall can play deeper.
What I do think was interesting though on Saturday was that like Alcaraz played deeper, didn't he? And Dewsbury Hall stayed as the split striker.
Well, I've not looked into this in great detail, but to me at times it looked like kind of a 4-1-4-1 in the second half.
Yeah, maybe that's right. Actually, yeah.
So you almost had Garner deeper on his own, with Dewsbury Hall to the left and Alcaraz to the right. And at times that was a 3 when Newcastle were building from the back a little bit slower, or when Everton had the ball, the two of those pushed on. That's a way of doing it. Actually, Dewsbury Hall, I think, probably by his own admission, would maybe prefer to play as a number 8, even though he likes the number 10 position, has been doing well. Alcaraz maybe is somewhere between a number 8 and a number 10. But I still don't think the balance is entirely right in there, even if you go with that. And that's why I say I don't think there's an ideal solution in the absence of Idrissa Gueye. It's kind of just trying to find something to get them through this period.
Yeah, and finally, mate, Bournemouth away. Obviously, our haunted house, really, isn't it? The Vitality Stadium, or whatever it's called these days. I mean,
that was a low point last season when
that was when Dyche said, wasn't it? If you take the defeats out, we're doing all right.
Yeah. So kind of travel there, travel back. You got that in the middle, and it was an abject Everton performance, and the weather was horrific as well. And you could just think that was a collective low point. It's like, this can't really get much worse.
Their fans were singing, "How do you watch this every week?" weren't they?
Yeah. And to be fair, I was sitting there in the press box thinking, I do watch this every week. I'm paid to, but I tell you what, it's hard work. And that's before you even go into the away fans who are having to spend their hard-earned money to go and do it. And that was a year ago. I mean, I suppose one thing we can do is reflect back on how it felt then and how we feel now, and the fact that so much has changed at the club, and kind of the financial security of the club feels much better. There's much more money around. There are better players still in the squad. It's not quite as bad as it was then. There's not quite as many fears over where Everton are in the table right now. Maybe that's the way to positively spin this, as I try to get my head around the early morning train to the house of horrors that is Bournemouth on Tuesday morning.
I just don't know what it is about, what is it about Bournemouth away that makes it so calamitous? Even think about the last season, that's probably may not even get in the top 3 worst days we've had at Bournemouth down the years. And that was it was horrendous. But I don't know. Is it just it always seems to be dark, and winter time we play down there? It's obviously a tiny ground. The trip down there is so long and difficult. It probably makes supporters a bit more aggy when we get beaten. We obviously had those 2 games with Lampard, didn't we, in quick succession, where there was some ugly scenes at the end of the second loss. But I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about that place which just turns Everton into. There's been some games where we've played all right there, but threw it away in calamitous fashion, like the 3-3 when they first came up. We had the 2-2, didn't we, where Keane scored, and who else scored? The one where Charleston got sent off, and we went 2-0 up, and then they got someone sent off, and then we conceded 2 goals. There's so many of them.
There's a Coleman own goal.
Oh, that was horrible, that one, yeah.
After Beto had seemingly rescued a point. I then
when the goalie dropped it at his feet, didn't he?
I then remember speaking to Beto after the game in his kind of broken English as it was then, and him telling me how sad he was. And I just remember thinking, this is Everton Bournemouth in a nutshell. Michael Keane, do you remember he had did he fracture his skull?
Yeah, he did.
In a game there. And then there were obviously the typical Callum Wilson and/or Junior Stanislas, Josh King games as well. So we don't like going to Bournemouth. It'd be lovely if that changed soon. It'd be lovely if it changed on Tuesday night.
Why is it always winter when we play there? It's always winter.
Always winter and never Christmas.
That's your opening line for the piece tomorrow if we get beat. So
I think that's a quote from Chronicles of Narnia, which shows me to be a big nerd.
There you go. That can be Paddy's lead in his match piece on Tuesday of Everton.
I actually think my first line, I'll have to go back and check, but my first line in last season's piece was something along the lines of, "I always hate coming to Bournemouth," and I'd hope it's slightly more eloquent than that. But you can kind of see that my tone after a late night in Bournemouth.
But just a serious point here before we wrap up. I've never been to the Vitality. You've obviously been there a few times. From the outside, to me, it looks quite similar to Fulham. Where we've not got a great record down there, but we've had good results and good wins. But similar sort of ground. It's not doesn't feel like the most intimidating place to go, really.
not intimidating. It's not intimidating in the slightest. And actually,
what is it?
I think scale-wise, it's similar to Fulham. I think it looks like a more modern Prenton Park, which is Tranmere Rovers ground in England's 4th tier, their league.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. And actually, I think Tranmere have got a slightly higher capacity than Bournemouth as well. So that shows you the kind of the level of club historically. I mean, we have to give Bournemouth enormous credit for what they've done and where they are now. That's really smart thinking and really smart processes. So of course there's that. And in many ways, they've kind of been the antithesis of Everton over the years for those reasons. But there's nothing else. It's not intimidating. It's not like, I mean, first game of the season, that Ellen Road atmosphere was really daunting. And I could see how that would be hard to play in. There's none of that with Bournemouth.
Oh, God. Something intangible. It's just the South Coast there that makes Everton play like idiots at times down there. But God knows what they've got in store for us tonight. It'll be by the time this goes out. But we will see. Paddy will be there to document the latest calamity. But listen, we've ended our Old Trafford streak. So hopefully we can go down there and do the same. Who knows? But we will wrap it up there. Thanks everybody for watching. If you're on YouTube, do hit like, do hit subscribe. If you're listening to us, do leave us a rating. Do leave us a review. The Bridewell are our sponsors as ever. And if you'd like to get in touch with us about anything, if you've got a theory on why Everton is so bad at Bournemouth, let us know. I'm open to hearing them.
Yeah, but I don't want it to just be like a conventional thing. I want it to be ideally quite wacky and revolve around
at least 500 words, I reckon. Yeah, something like that. Paddy can read through them all. So yeah, it's evertonbyline at gmail.com. We'll have instant match reaction to that game tonight here on the Blue Room. Then our usual bits and pieces throughout the week as we build up to Sean Dyche's return at Hill Dixon Stadium on Saturday. I'm sure Paddy can't wait to speak to Sean after that game.
It'll be an emotional reunion.
There we go. So tune in next Tuesday to see how that goes. But yeah, fingers crossed the lads do the business on the South Coast later today. That's it from me and Paddy. Up the Toffees. We'll catch you again soon.